Hear these words from Matthew 14. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side of the lake while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had sent them off, he went to a mountainside by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was still there alone. The boat was already well off from land, but being buffeted by waves because it was going against the wind. And during the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When disciples saw him walking toward them on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost!" Jesus said to them, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," said Peter, "tell me to come to you on the water, and I will." "Come." And Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water, came toward Jesus, and then he saw that the wind was making waves. He was afraid and beginning to sink, and cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And they climbed into the boat, and the wind died down. And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "You are truly the Son of God." Words from the Lord in the house of the Lord. Now, the story of Jacob, or Israel, left out a few details to get to where we were today in the reading. He went back and, fearing for his life, had sent his family and all of his goods and his servants on ahead of him to his brother's place, and then he went in to see whether he was going to survive his confrontation with his brother, Esau. And when he got there, his brother embraced him, forgave him for everything, and welcomed him to his house. So they established themselves there, and Joseph and his little brother Benjamin, who were the children of Rachel, and the other 8 were children of Leah. And Joseph was a bit full of himself because Dad doted on him. And in this case, Dad gave him a coat of many colors. Now, if you want to know the exact history of this, why, get the CD of Joseph and his many-colored coat. It's good. It's a good opera, but the brothers hated him. First of all, Dad liked him better than them because he was the son of his favorite. And they didn't like it, the fact that he tended to lord it over them, and it mentions in the writings that he was a dreamer, and he would interpret the dreams for his brothers, and the dreams always showed that he was so much better or so more valued than his brothers were. So you can understand when he went out there to find out, when Dad sent him out to find out how things were going with the brothers, they were more than just a little bit angry at him. They put him in a cistern. A cistern was an underground that had an opening on it that a man could get in or out of, and during the rainy seasons they filled with water. But during the dry seasons they became dry. They were just going to put him in there and leave him. Well, some of them wanted to kill him, but his oldest brother was going to put him in there, then get him out and take him home so that it wouldn't break Dad's heart. They took his coat, killed a sheep, covered his coat with blood, so they would have evidence. Now, with the pandemic going on and being stuck at home, I've been watching with my wife a lot of Matlock and a lot of Perry Mason. And so I understand all of these ramifications of evidence and so forth, and how misleading some of the evidence is. So they took him out and they sold him to a group of Ishmaelites who were on their way to Egypt, and thus we begin to look at the next chapter in the life of Joseph, the life of Jacob. So anyway, that just wanted to bring us up to date, and that's where we are. He's on his way to Egypt as a slave, and the brothers are going home to tell their dad the bad news that Joseph is dead. On to more happy things. Jesus walked on the water, and he said when Peter said, "Call me and I'll come." But he got part way to Jesus, and then he looked not at Jesus, but he looked at the water. And he looked at the waves, and he listened to the wind, and he began to sink. Now, there's one thing for sure. If you're going to make waves, you've got to get out of the boat. If you're going to calm waves, you've got to get out of the boat. You can't do much sitting in the boat. That's what some churches have resigned themselves to doing, is just being the boat, so that we can come and we can sit and we can be safe and we can be comfortable. And that's not what we're called to be. We're never called to be comfortable. It's okay to sit on nice chairs. It's probably nice this morning for some of you out there sitting in your recliners, leaning way back. Don't do it. You'll do what I do when I sit in my recliner and I lean way back. There's no listening anymore. But God wants us to listen to His message, and the message He had for Peter and all of the disciples was, keep your eyes focused where the help is, not where the danger is. We go through things all the time in our lives. We have little fender benders. We have lost things. There's more lost stuff in my house than I can believe. And someday I'll find some of it when I don't need it anymore. I've got duplicate tools in my garage, and duplicates to the duplicates, and then another duplicate, because when I needed it, it wasn't there. But Ace Hardware is just up the road, and they got one. I must have 10 of the special knives and things that you cut linoleum with, because I could never find one until I brought my new one home and laid it down right beside the one that I couldn't find. We're quick to replace because it's easier than going to the source. We're quick to replace things because it's easier to go get a new one than it is to work hard at rebuilding the old one. How does that relate to somebody walking on the water? Well, it's a stretch maybe, but just remember that the disciples were in that boat because Jesus had sent them there. And they were scared to death that the waves were too high and the wind was too strong, and they were not making any headway, and I'm sure it was splashing over the gunnels, and everybody was panicked. And then they saw someone walking toward on the water, and they couldn't believe it. It's a ghost. We'd say, well, there are no ghosts, so it must have been an apparition. No, it wasn't. It was the real Jesus coming to them in their time of need and trouble. And they were frightened first, until Peter recognized him and said, call me, I'll come and do what you want me to do. I thought being a preacher was probably the easiest thing in the world. And so I got to do it 30 years ago. And some days it gets harder than I ever thought it would. But a day like today, when I can talk to people, it's easier than I thought it would be. If I remember that the words I have to bring are not mine. They're the ones that I'm given to share, to offer. I have trouble with sermons some days, because I want this cute, really fancy message, and it just won't come together, because I'm looking at the dictionary for help. I'm looking at the thesaurus for synonyms for the words that I shouldn't even be using. When simple things like love, confidence, trust, those are the kinds of words that the messages that we want to receive from Christ really abound in. We don't need 15-letter words. We don't need 3-syllable words. We need belief. We need trust. We need love. And Peter was fine. He got out of the boat. There, he just made an active decision that should have amounted to something. Until in the follow-through, the first thing he looked at was the trouble and not the goal. When he looked at the trouble, he fell. He fell to that trouble because we aren't strong enough by ourselves to overwhelm and overcome all of the troubles in our life. We only can do that when we keep our eyes on the Christ who loves us enough to be with us constantly, to share with us constantly the abiding love of God. Yeah. How lonely must David or Joseph have felt when his brothers threw him in the cistern? How much hope did he have for his life? So he went to Egypt. We're going to talk more about him in future Sundays. But know that this is the absolute low point, the absolute depth of where anyone can be. He's been turned on by his family. He's been turned on by his friends. He's been exiled to a foreign land alone. Alone. Because he didn't know where he was about to go. He didn't know what God had in mind for him. Anybody out there in the countryside that knows what God has in store for him tomorrow or the tomorrows to come? Are we going to be willing when he says to us, come? Are we willing to get out of the boat and take an action and do something that Christ would have us do? If we're going to do that kind of stuff, we have to remember, we have to rely on Christ, not on us. We're stagnant now because we're not meeting. We're stagnant because we're afraid to jump out and do new things and do more things and take care of more people. Because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. Joseph had no idea what tomorrow would bring. He could not imagine the sadness and the heartbreak that was to be wrought upon his father when his brothers went home and lied to him. We lie to each other often. We promise each other great things. And then we forget that without God's help, without the reliance of the love of Jesus Christ, we cannot do great things. We'll sink. But if we can keep our focus on the power that is in our lives, if we can keep our focus on the Christ who loves us, we don't have to worry about the waves and the wind. We can walk on water too. But nothing happens as long as we sit in the boat and do nothing. So be bold about responding. If you see a need, take care of it. If you see a need that this church needs to take care of, let us know. Let me know. We got things to do. But we need more minds and more imagination and more concern and more love to get done the things that we ought to be doing, because we are the church. Doesn't make any difference whether we're all here sitting in the seats or not. We are still the church. And Jesus says to the church, come, walk on water with me. Have faith with me. Have confidence in my love. Yeah. If you're going to make waves, you got to get out of the boat. Amen.